My name is Lindsay Rule. I work for UVM Extension. Here's my contact information. If you want to contact me about goCrop or any NMP questions, feel free to reach out to me by email. Got a work number here and a cell number. We also have a bunch of information on our website here, and it includes like how to take a soil sample or digging in manual for nutrient management planning, and past recorded NMP classes, and also past goCrop tutorials. This tutorial is being recorded and will also be posted on that site. So that said, I am going to try to keep this to 2 hours, but I can make no real guarantees in that, because I will try to go through rather detailed and methodically using goCrop. And I think if we just did goCrop, I could probably get through it in about an hour. But I'm also going to be talking a little bit about NMP nuances, and so that can kind of take a little bit more time. Plus, if you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt me at any time. I personally might get a little bit of like tunnel vision, or I might not be able to like see your hand raised or see a question in the chat. So feel free to unmute your mic, and also if we could have like a community approach here. So, you know, if you see someone's got their hand up and I'm just cruising through, feel free to unmute your mic and let me know. All right. So what I'm hoping to get through, hoping that you will get out of today, I'm hoping that I will present this well, is that we'll go through how to create an account. I want you to become familiar with goCrop navigation. This tutorial really is designed for folks who are creating their NMP for the first time. So there's a lot more that we'll get through. If you are someone who is updating your plan, we will have another goCrop tutorial for that in about 2 weeks on January 23rd at 10. That'll be online. That'll also be recorded, and you'll have access to that at your leisure. But just again, to reiterate, this is tutorials really for folks who are, it's their first time in goCrop ever. Okay, so then we'll become familiar with that navigation. We'll walk through some goCrop steps. And then with some of this, I'm hoping to share some neat tips and tricks that the new layout of goCrop has that can make creating a plan just a little bit faster and hopefully a little bit easier. And I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but this tutorial is mainly on how to use goCrop. I will go over some of the nuances of creating a plan that meets NRCS 590 standards and Vermont Agency of Agricultural required agricultural practices, but it will not encompass all of that. So please, you know, when you ready to say your plan is done, or you feel really good about it, that's great, but please also reach out to any technical assistance providers or technical services providers to make sure that your plan does meet the NRCS 590 requirement standards and Vermont Agency of Agriculture required agricultural practices. So also that said, this is a live demo. I think in the last year in particular, like goCrop has gone through leaps and bounds of really making a lot of great changes, but we are still finding some bugs out in the wild. So in that case, if we do encounter one, please be patient as we navigate through that. And if you ever do experience a bug when you're using goCrop, please feel free to reach out to me, again, through email, my work, or my cell phone number. I did purposely include my cell phone number because I know that sometimes folks are working on NMPs and non-traditional work hours, or I might be out in the field or not at my desk, and I really don't want something that could be like a 3-minute conversation or longer, that's fine, to keep you from making the progress you want to on your nutrient management plan when you are ready to work on it. So, you know, worst case scenario, if you call my cell and I don't answer, I don't answer, but don't hesitate to use that number. All right, so then, like I said, I'm going to see how far we can get. I do want to try to cover as much as possible in each part of goCrop. So as a result of that, this might be pretty slow and it might be pretty tedious, and some parts might be rather monotonous, but that's part of nutrient management planning. And I want to make sure that folks understand each step as thoroughly as possible. So there's a potential that if we don't get through everything today, that we might have a part two. That said, if we're hitting noon and you need to leave, or at any time you need to leave, this will be recorded and you'll be able to access it. We will have a goCrop update tutorial, not this Friday, but next Friday, January 23rd. Again, that's for folks who are updating the nutrient management plan in goCrop, and there's some other tips and tricks and nuances to doing that. And so that'll, again, be recorded and available online. And then also our nutrient management planning classes start January 15th. And again, those classes will be available live, streaming from your home in a webinar fashion, just like this is, and also will be recorded and put on our website. So I think that kind of covers the intro piece. And I'm going to share my screen here for our for goCrop. All right, can folks see my screen right now? It's my Chrome browser. I can't. Thank you. I was going to say, I can't see anybody's reactions. I can just see me and my screen. Thank you. Okay. And so just a couple of things. One is that goCrop really works best in Chrome. I know folks use Firefox and Microsoft Edge, and maybe there's some other browsers out there that I'm not thinking of right now, but really Chrome is going to be the path of least resistance of when you're using goCrop, because that's what supports it best. To get to goCrop, you can use this very simple web address URL, which is www.gocrop, that's GOCROP.com. And that will bring you to this page. And notice that the URL, the web address does change. That's okay. You're still where you need to be. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll see login, you'll see sign up. But if this is truly your first time in goCrop, you may have never been to this page and you need to sign up before you log in. And so when you sign up, that'll bring you to this page. On this page, you'll enter your email address. So this is the email address of the person who will be managing the goCrop account that represents the farm, right? So it should be active because they'll need to confirm your email address. If you're working with someone who doesn't have their own email address, please create one for them. Go to Gmail or AOL or whatever other email service the farmer would prefer to use and create an email account for them. Please do, if you are a technical assistance provider or technical service provider, please do not use your personal email. This really should be the person who is working on the farm. Create a password. Create a password that you will remember, that's going to make sense to you. If I would recommend for folks to create a simple password, one that might not have caps in it, one that might not have special characters, one that might not have numbers, because at the end of the day, you're going to have to write this in, and just creating the simplest thing might be the easiest. So you'll enter your password, you'll retype your password, you'll click create an account. I think there's just a couple things I want to touch on here. I can picture like every IT person I know saying, don't do what I'm about to suggest you do, which is to write your login information down so you have a place just in case you come back to this page and you forget, you'll have a place to go back to it. If you feel comfortable, you can share your login information with your technical assistance provider so that they also know what it is, just in the event that you need to log in from somewhere and that information is not saved. From here, you'll click create an account. I made so many new Gmail accounts so that I could truly make new goCrop accounts that Google told me I couldn't do it anymore. So I can't walk you through that exact process of what that looks like for the first time. But when you click create an account, you'll get an email that will go to your inbox. And for me, in this Google account, that email says, welcome to goCrop, and it's in my main box. There have been times when this welcome to goCrop email could be squirreled somewhere, anywhere really, in your spam, some other folder. So once you click create an account and your confirmed email gets sent and you don't see it in your main inbox, check an all mail folder. I don't know what everybody's email setup looks like, so you might just need to play around with it and see what you can find. At any rate, you'll get this welcome to email, welcome to goCrop email, and then you might have something that says,
I'm on a Zoom right now. Can I call you back? Or
Yeah, no,
okay, thanks.
I've got an appointment at 12.
Okay. Yeah.
and so then,
Sorry.
okay. So you might have something up here that says like display images below, and you might not see this exact wording the first time you open the email. You can either click display images. I already clicked display images, or you can scroll down, you'll get to this log into goCrop. When you click log into goCrop, it will then take you back to goCrop, and instead of you being in this sign-in screen, right, I didn't move anywhere from there, you will be at this login screen. So from this login screen, you'll enter your credentials, your email address that you just entered before, and your password. I just want to say for a moment to take a minute to say that we created this system where you have to confirm your email before you can proceed through goCrop, because goCrop needs some way to communicate to you. We need some way to communicate to you, especially when it comes around billing, right? Like you don't want that to be a surprise. So we have some automated messaging for that, or when your subscription will end. And so that's why we have that set up this way. And that's why it's really important to do.
Can I ask a question?
Please, yes.
I'm looking at the login and it's got an alternate email. When I tried to remove that email, it doesn't, I can't, I don't have a place to put in I can't put in my own email and create my own password.
That might be a question that we can connect on after this. It might be helpful for us to set up an online meeting so you can share your screen and I can see it.
I was a couple of minutes late, so I'm just trying to catch up, I guess.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of connect a little bit, right? Like when I came here, you saw that my email that I just logged in with was already here. And if you're using somebody else's computer, you can, it's got a bunch of saved here, but you can type in a different one with the password. And so sometimes if you include an email address that might look like the correct password is there, you have no way of seeing this. So it's a good practice to re-enter it. That said, if you at any time forget your password or need to confirm your email or forgot your email, there are these 3 different links that will help you retrieve your password, confirm your email, or figure out how to change your email address as well. So these are available to you at any time. If you're just not making headway, you're entering an incorrect email or password, goCrop will have a little message that will let you know that it's not quite working, but you have these other options to help troubleshoot that.
So I could confirm my email and that would...
I don't know what you're seeing when you type in your email and your password.
Where it's listing to put my email, I click on it and I can't, it's not responding.
Okay. Oh, what browser are you in? Let's start there.
Chrome.
Okay. Are you available after this tutorial and we can set up something where you can share your screen so I can see what's happening?
Yes.
Okay, let's plan on doing that. And yeah, because it's hard for me to know what's happening without seeing it. So we'll work on that then.
How about I go on mute and I'll just catch up with you later. I'm sorry for the problem.
Oh no, I mean this is part of
Yeah.
what I do. So I'm happy to help, but
Okay.
we can do a little bit later. Thank you.
I've had a goCrop account before, so I don't know if there's a whatever. We'll figure it out.
We'll
Thank
look
you.
into it for sure.
Thank you.
All right, so after you've created your account and you've confirmed your email, you enter your credentials, and then you'll click login. So when you first log in, you won't see a farm here because you haven't created one. Like I said, I ran out of the ability to create a new email, to make a totally new goCrop account, because each goCrop account is associated with an email. So when you first log into goCrop, you'll see a little button here that says, plus new farm. And you'll also see these options below. It'll be account and synced, and it'll tell you when it's last been synced. And this is really nice to look at if you are working on goCrop with somebody across multiple devices. You can kind of see when goCrop should be called up to whatever somebody else might have been entering. And then we have an account. And I want to talk about what's in the account before we move on. And this would be some of the information you just created, right? You just created your password. You can change your account email. This is also where you can log out, and you can reset temporary data. I would ignore this as much as possible, but it's there. So just to kind of like reiterate, right, we've got this green sidebar menu. I'm in the account tab, and within the account tab, I have these 4 different sub-tabs. We just talked about the account sub-tab. There's the profile tab. It's really helpful for us if you fill this out, and it only takes a few moments. So, you say which describes you. For me, I'm university, but you might be a farmer, a crop consultant, or another farm type, which again best describes you, and then the number of acres managed. Once you click that, you click submit. It says your changes have been saved, which is great. In the farm tab, you'll see a list of farms. When you first come to this, if you haven't started a farm, you won't see any farms listed here. Most likely, most people will only see one farm once they start it. And then we have a tab for your data, and this just lets you know where we're at with our privacy policy, and you can see more about that by clicking this link here. So in the bottom left, we also have this all farms tab. And again, like I said, when you first come to this page, you won't see anything here. And we're going to start with a new farm and walk through that. So in the upper right, I'll click new farm, and we'll name our farm. And I say Adaptive Farm 2. I like alliteration, it's kind of fun. And then name your farm name, what your farm name is. And then we have these options for use defaults for. Chances are, if you're on this call, you were in Vermont, so we're going to choose Vermont NMP. That's the option. Ignore all the others. You're going to want to choose Vermont NMP. Once you click that, you'll click next. And now we're going to start describing the information for our farm, and we're going to enter the address. This address is one that will show up on reports, and is like the farm address of where you'd like to be contacted from. And then the county you'll also choose. The county is really important because when you're entering field information, Surgo, the soil database, essentially will pull soil series information from the county. And so that's why we have this here. And we'll go over a little bit more about what that looks like when we're actually entering that, but that's why that's there. And then we have our settings. We are still working on connecting goCrop to a bunch of tools, and they will be hopefully coming out in the next year or so. But right now, the only thing you really need to think about here in farm settings is this advanced crop. Make sure that is clicked. That's very important. Ignore everything else for the time being. It's not available. When it is available, we'll let you know. And if you're interested in it, we're happy to help walk you through what those tools do and how they operate. Also, for the time being, ignore this Vermont Discount Program access code. There will be a time when that may be relevant to use, and at that point, I'd recommend reaching out to Susan Brulette, and she can kind of connect you a little bit more with that. For the time being, we're going to skip that too. So I'm going to click submit to start my new farm. So now we see I've got two farms. I've got a fantastic farm from before and my fantastic farm 2 that I just created. I am the owner and my subscription is active. That is what this bar says here. And we're about to go into planning. So now that I've clicked planning, start my plan, I have a couple more options on my green sidebar menu. I've got planning, records, and farm assets that's associated with this farm. And I have this other one that's farm settings. And I just want to let you know what's in farm settings. I'm going to click on that to show you. So again, we've got our details, which we just entered, but that's here where you can edit any of that information. Our settings, which we just entered. Now, we've also got a latitude and longitude associated with the address I just put in here that auto-populates. We also have billing. Because when you first sign up for goCrop, you get a free 30-day trial. Once that free 30-day trial ends, in order to continue working in goCrop, you will need to choose a subscription. You can either choose a subscription for 1 year here, or auto renewal here. If you think you're interested or eligible for any discounts, again, please contact Susan and she can help set you up with how to get connected to those. One of the other nice things on the billing side too here is that it lets us know when our subscription expires. Again, we're in farm settings here because it's connected to the farm I'm in. I can also invite users. And with your goCrop account, you get 5 users. So let's say that you're managing your goCrop account and you're working with somebody. Let me back up. And there's like a couple different user types where you can set the permissions. So let's say that you are managing your farm and you're working with somebody who you really only want to be able to access records. You can invite them as a user and set the permissions so that they can only access the, make any edits to records. They might be able to view your plan, but can only enter records. You can also invite your technical assistance providers, and this is going to be best practice too, because it's a best practice that only you have your login information. And I know that's not how things work in the real world all the time. But you can also invite your technical assistance provider if you want them also to view or work on your plan without giving them your full login. Because you can also disinvite a user as well. If this is something you're interested in setting up, please contact me and I can help walk you through that. There's also this tab for record years. If you are new to goCrop, this probably doesn't make any sense to you, and it shouldn't make any sense to you because it's not something we use anymore. But it was in the old goCrop, and we know that a handful of people are returning to goCrop year after year might be like, where did this thing go? And this tab is just saying it doesn't exist like it used to here anymore. And then we have that same tab to go over data and ownership information. Okay, we've done a lot of intro here. I'm going to go back to planning, and to get back to planning in my farm, I'm going to click the planning tab on the left. And we don't have any plans started, right? So we need to start a plan. And to do that, we'll click this button in the top right, start a plan. goCrop automatically defaults to the current year or the next year on your plan. In this case, that's 2026. Should probably keep it as 2026 because that's the plan year we're in. You can make any notes you want to about this plan. Just kind of look at a little bit more of a perhaps advanced situation. Typically, we don't use the notes field, but if you do enter a note here, it's a note that shows up here and it doesn't show up in any of your reports. We also have this show advanced, which is like show advanced settings. This is one way that goCrop was trying to is integrating more flexibility and transparency. And so I just want to show you that this exists. If it's your first time in goCrop, I would recommend ignoring this, but you can create a custom plan label, right? Like goCrop defaults your plan to 2026 annual plan. You can rename it something else if you'd like. goCrop and all the reports also defaults to the last time the report goCrop was updated, but you could change the date on that here. You only have one option here for Vermont NMP reports. We'll click that here. You might have more options as we include more and more into goCrop. And then we have some nutrient management options. Do we want to include removal of nutrient balances, grazing manure reports, and so on and so on. For now, this is your first time in goCrop, just leave the defaults as they are, and we can always change them. I would recommend consulting your technical assistance provider before you change anything in this section. All right, so that's there. So basically I've moved on, and now I'm in my plan, my 2026 annual plan. I've created it. And on this page, we have a dashboard. We're on the dashboard. We also have a tab for reports. We'll get into that later. And then we also have these more information, right? We've got our plan settings down here. This is what we just entered, right? We've got our name for 2026 annual plan. It's based on from scratch because we don't have anything to base it on in goCrop. If you're updating your plan, you can choose which year you want to base your new plan on. So this is our first year, so it's from scratch. And that's why we don't have any previous year or 2-year prior plans. And we're telling us what's included in our plan settings, which is the Vermont NMP report. At any time, we can go back and edit this by clicking Edit Settings. Up in the upper right-hand corner, we also see this plan status. It'll be active or like needs to update your subscription. And this ability that's not enabled right now to lock your plan. This is a feature that will be upcoming, but is not present at the moment. But basically, the idea behind lock your plan is that once you've completed your plan, you would lock it, and that would preserve what's in it. So if you go back and change it, your reports wouldn't automatically update. They would keep what they are. We did this because there were occasions where folks would go into a past year plan to work on it when they meant to work on a current year plan. So we're just kind of trying to safeguard against that. But that's there, and it's not enabled right now. So don't worry about it, but I did want to explain a little bit about what it is. All right, so we are in our 2026 annual plan. We're on the dashboard. We have this plan checklist. So these are all the steps in goCrop, and you can kind of see it's a little bit faded out right now, but there are all these little circles here. And these circles basically indicate if it hasn't been started, if the step is in progress, or if it's completed. I'm going to say this now, and I'm probably going to say it a bunch throughout the tutorial. goCrop checks for completeness. It does not check for accuracy. So goCrop knows if you filled in a bubble or like filled in some text. It has no idea if you've filled it in correctly or accurately. It's done. It's filled in. All right. So now we've done a bunch to get to this point, and it's ready to start. We're ready to start our plan. And we can do that with 2 buttons: the Edit Plan, which is always going to be there, and Start Planning. But this is the only time that the Start Planning button is in goCrop, and so this is the only for this year for this plan. So it's really fun to actually just press the Start Planning button because we're never going to see it again for your 2026 plan. So now that we are starting our planning, goCrop now has like those same checklist items, but now it kind of has them in this diamond steps. And so the diamond is filled in for the step that we're on. So we're on the getting started step. And then the steps are connected to a line if you need to fill out something prior to get to the next step. So in goCrop, we're like, you have to go to the getting started step before you can get to the plan narrative. You have to enter nutrient sources before you can enter nutrient analyses. You have to enter equipment, but you don't have to enter anything before, and it's not connected to anything after. And then you have to enter some field information before any of these other steps are open. So right now, we've got 2 side menus. We've got this green sidebar menu and the diamond step. I kind of call it a menu. I can't click on these right now, but you can kind of jump around. And just one more thing before we get past getting started. Your screen layout may look different than my screen layout depending on your screen size, quite literally. Like the goCrop will format it for the different screen sizes. So if you've got a really tiny screen and you feel like things are a little bit more jumbled, you can collapse the green sidebar menu and the diamond steps. And you can collapse, make it smaller, the green sidebar menu by clicking this little collapse menu here with this little caret. And you can also collapse the diamond steps with this little bar. If you hover over this little bar, you'll see it has like another little caret, so like you can hide the sidebar. So I'll just click that, and now I don't see any of my menu options. Because my screen is large and I think it's helpful to see those, especially in a demo like this, I'm going to open up both my sidebar and my other menu. All right, so we're getting started, and the getting started just has a little bit of some navigational information to tell us about like jumping between steps. We can use our browser's forward and backwards buttons to go to previous pages or the pages we were just on. And at any time you want to go back to your dashboard, you can click the back to dashboard button here, which is really helpful because now we have all our steps. We can see them, we can go to reports. So now, I just said that checklist mirrors the diamond steps. I'm going to click on narratives and farm information. And that's going to open up the first step of our plan narrative past getting started. So we can always go back to getting started to see any of that information in our settings. We're going to be in plan narrative now. So the plan narrative is what it sounds like. It's a narrative, so it's pretty like text heavy. And so you can, and it has these like 7 different sections here. The planner details, the farm, the manure, tillage information, watershed, land, and livestock. And then this kind of mirrors, right, like that checklist we just saw for your entire NMP. Again, these will kind of fill out once we go through them. So let's start with our planner details. For our planner details, we first start with the farm name. So that's, I know we just kind of entered that in some other places with our previously, but we're going to keep doing that here because this is what's going to show up on your report. So I said, all right, this is Fantastic Farm 2. And if you have a typo and you want to change it, they'll let you know and you fix that up. Put the manager name in. You can see that I've worked with a couple of people here. It's auto-populating. So again, this is the farm manager. You'll put in your phone number here and any and your contact email here as well. And you can leave any personal notes. Again, these personal notes won't show up on any of reports. And I think one thing that I want to comment here on too is that if you are a farmer and you're working with a technical assistance provider, they are assisting you in creating the NMP, but you, the farmer, are the planner. So that's why your name is going here for planner details. And then we have some options for planning assistance provided by. This is optional to fill out, but it is really, really helpful, especially if you just start a plan. You can think like maybe 5-7 years from now, the person who helped you get your maps together and your Russells might not be with that organization anymore, or might not be with that organization in the same capacity anymore. But it would be really nice to know who created that, so at least we know where to go if we need to update any of that information. And you can contact us, or you can enter as many people as you would like. But maybe that's just a couple of people. So you might be sitting next to Kate Wettergreen or Jason Tankersley from NRCD, and you can put their name there. But you might also know that from time to time, me or Sarah or Jeff are also helping. You can throw our names in here too. And I'm just putting in some random information. Don't take this as an actual person or contact information. One other thing that we see here that we might not have seen in other forums are like these little help texts, like little hints that are question marks and little bubbles. And so just you can see what's there by clicking on them, and will give you just a little bit more information on what to expect to put in there. And if you're like, wow, my screen just got too busy with all that help text, you can just minimize those by pressing the little X within the bubble. So those could be helpful, to be on the lookout for that. So now I've entered my information. I'm going to click save. Now that I have all of that information filled in, not only do I have this little green checkbox, but I also have the information of what I just entered displayed below. And we're going to continue on. I'm filling out the rest of this information. So in our farm, we have describe your farm to the future. And what we're looking for there is what the help text will describe here. So I'll just kind of open those up. And I'm just gonna, you guys still just see my goCrop account, right? I'm gonna assume that's yes, because nobody else is responding.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, excellent, thank you. And I've lost access to my mouse, so that's great. I am experiencing some technical difficulties at the moment, which is preventing me from entering anything, which is too bad. Okay, where did it go? Guys, please bear with me. This is like my computer situation. All right, well, we'll move on from that idea then. So for a farm, what we're really looking for is, we manage 200, like how many acres you manage, and maybe how many animals you have, and any management practices you may use or are looking to use. So we say, usually no-till on corn land, want to begin injecting in hayland. And you might say something like, we plan to expand our land base and our herd size. I think it can also be nice here too, if you're not planning on changing anything, saying like, we do not plan to expand our land base or our herd size in the near future. But really, this is just to give a bird's eye view of, in general, what's being grown on your farm, how you're managing it, and anything you want to change or start changing in the future. 3 to 5 sentences is great, however that makes sense to you. And then we have some other questions here. Describe your typical crop rotation. So it might be something like, we have like, about 1/4 of our acres is in continuous corn, 1/4 is in permanent hay, and 1/2 is in a corn hay rotation. Something along along those lines, describing what you're growing, how long you're growing it, and if you're rotating it between any other crops. How do you determine yield goals or estimates? This sentence is, or let me put it this way. The RAPs require that you know the yields coming from your field. And so what we're really looking for here is something like, we, count loads and bales for each field and know the average weight of a load or bale. If you have pasture, how are you determining how much forage your animals are getting from pasture? Is another question. If you don't have records, one of the things you can say is, we base anticipated yield on average values for our region from soil series fact sheets. And then You could or you could not, but you could write something and they're like, we plan on, taking better yield record in the upcoming year and updating our anticipated yields based off of our record. I think the other thing I want to start kind of also mentioning here too, right, was we have this help text here that corn silage yields are typically for goCrop purposes are taken at a 35% moisture, or for hay it's 15%, right? So you might take a really heavy load of corn or have a really heavy bale of hay, but what we want to know in goCrop is what is that weight adjusted for these particular moistures to have kind of more of a standard value. And that'll come up more in our field by field planning for our crops. So I just wanted to bring that up now to help folks start thinking about that. So we're going to save this in our plan narrative. And now we have this checkbox here, and our new box with our farm narrative shows up next to it. Similar, we'll fill stuff out for manure. When you apply manure, maybe you don't have manure. In that case, you'll say NA. Otherwise, like applicable. Otherwise, you'll choose the times that make the most sense to you. And then how long do you incorporate before applications on average? And I think like this can really like trip people up because, right, you might inject on corn land and that's immediate, and you might broadcast on hay and that's never incorporated. So what do? Do you enter like the system that you use most for your acres, or do you use the system that you use most for the volume of manure you have, or do you average without? I don't know. That is a good question. And so for that, I would say choose the answer that makes the most sense to you. You will have the opportunity to choose these options on a per field basis. So this is just again a high level overview. Somebody's looking at this, what makes the most sense for you to enter here, right? And so then you can describe that below. And for this describe your management settings, right, we have this show hints. And what we really want to know here is, do you have a pit? Do you have a stack? Do you have two pits? Do you have two stacks? Do you have a pit and a stack? So we might say, I have one pit. And then you can start describing how you manage that manure. We inject on corn land before planting and broadcast manure on hay land after harvest. If you import or export manure, this is a really good place to start to describe that too, right? So I might say something like, we generate 1 million gallons and 250,000 are exported. And this will help whoever's looking at your plan later kind of start to make more sense of the numbers that you're entering in your manure sources and the numbers that show up on reports. And if you find that like you only did this first sentence and then you get to nutrient sources and you begin entering the information and thinking about it a little bit more, you can always come back to your farm narrative and updating it with the sentence that kind of describes a little bit more if any manure is imported or exported. I'm going to leave that as is. I'm going to save it for now. And I've got that checkbox, and now my manure information shows up here. I'm going to walk through the rest of the steps, but I do want to point out that at any time you do want to edit them, you can click on the row that they're in to bring up that form, or you can click the edit button in the box. So two ways to get at the same thing. For tillage, same thing. We have these drop down menus. What is your primary mode of tillage? Maybe you are no-till. In that case, you'd say NA. Maybe you do a little bit of chisel plowing and then use a field cultivator on top of that. And then you have the option to explain what that is, right? No matter, you can say we are generally no-till, but plow when rotating from hay to corn. So that is an example of something that could go here, but again, you're going to want to write the description of what you do that best describes your operation. So again, I'm just putting examples here, but you should write what makes the most sense for you and your operation. All right, we got our watershed information. Again, we got some more help text, and we'll put what our watershed is here. And then we have this hydrological unit code. If you don't know what this is, please reach out to your technical service provider or technical assistance provider, and they can help get you set up with hydrological code and if the watershed is impaired or not. If it is impaired, they may also be able to tell you why it is. And that might be because it's agricultural runoff, stream banks, erosion, and high temperatures. Again, these are just examples. I don't know if that's true for this particular watershed, just some examples of what could go there. Then we click save, build in our watershed information, and now we go onto our land. Our land base, we have different categories, right? We've got our total, our tillable, our permanent hayland, our permanent pasture, and then it can either be owned or leased. One thing to note here is that goCrop does not tally your totals for you based off of what you put in tillable, permanent, and pasture hayland. And I think it's also important to like not double count your acres, right? So you may have hayland, but it's in rotation, and so that would still go in tillable, right? Because there's some amount of row crops happening there. So I think for mine, I said in my narrative, right, I don't have any pasture. I'm operating, I think I said 200 acres, so I'm gonna put 50 here, and then you know, half of that's rotated and half of that is in continuous corn, so that would be 150 tillable acres, and then I add those up together in my own. And for the example here, I'm going to say that 0 was leased for all of them. I think the other caveat I want to say here is that the acres that go here are only the acres in the nutrient management plan. So it is possible that as a technical assistance provider, or maybe you as a farmer, right, you've got a bunch of fields around your farm and you're like, that's where my nutrients go. These fields way over here, I harvest from them, but I can't get the fertilizer to them. I can't get the manure to them. It's just not enough hours in the day, or maybe you don't have enough manure, like whatever it is. So those fields might not have soil samples and they're not in your nutrient management plan. That's okay, right? That's what's going to work for you. So it is only those acres in your nutrient management plan that are going to go here. In the event that you have some that are in your nutrient management plan and some that aren't, it's really helpful in your narrative to say, okay, I own and operate 300 acres and 200 of those are in my nutrient management plan. That's going to be really helpful for whoever's working with you in the future, or if in the event you get inspected, it's going to help that inspector know right off the bat, oh, there's a lot more land here, and it's only that the farmer operates, but only these acres are in the nutrient management plan. And as long as the nutrient management plan meets the standards, should be set to go. The other piece of this is like, this is in your plant narrative and you enter it. But the other thing that the state, if they are looking at your plan, are going to want to see is that your total for owned and leased matches the total that's in your field inventory report. And I know that if you haven't been in goCrop before, you're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. It will make sense later. But what I want to connect the dots here is that you are also going to be entering acreage on a field by field basis. And then goCrop creates a field inventory report. And at the bottom of it, it totals the amount of acres that you said were owned and the amount of acres you said were leased as entered on a field per field basis. So it's great to, like, when you're up front working a narrative, throwing numbers in here, but you may need to go back to your farm narrative after looking at your field inventory report and adjusting the total number here. That doesn't make sense to you, that's okay. We will help you, help walk you through this, but I just wanted to put that out there now so that when it does happen, you're like, oh, okay, this makes sense. I did hear of this. Or maybe you won't remember, and that's okay, but I just wanted to put that out there. All right, so we're gonna click save for our plan narrative. And now we're on to our livestock. It's possible that you are a farm that doesn't have any livestock. If that's the case, please still open this so that you can just click this farm has no livestock and save it and move on. That's going to help goCrop out. That's going to help your reports out. But if you do have livestock, you can choose animal types from this drop-down menu. We have a bunch of different dairy options, beef, horse, goat, and other, if none of these in this drop-down describe what you have. We'll choose the one that does describe at least one of your animal groups or all of them eventually, and then you'll enter the information for them. So this present number, I think, really should be like an average number. So we'll say, I'm, like I said, at 200 cows, but maybe 150 of them are lactating. The maximum amount that my farm can accommodate might be 160, but I only have 150. And then we'll put the average weight, the average milk production per day. I'm just putting some random numbers in here. And then we have these questions if they're always confined. So do they have access to pasture ever, or do they not? They're always in a barn or whatever. We'll say, yep. And then that's it, right? And then you can add as many groups as make sense to you in the ways that make sense to you that capture the total amount of animals that you have. So I'm going to add another one. I'm going to say that they're my dry cows. I've got 50 of them. My max amount is 60. Putting in the same information. They're dry cows, so they're not producing milk. I'm going to put 0 for that. And then for these, I'm going to say, no, they actually have some access to pasture. And I can choose my grazing type, if it's continuous or management intensive. For these options, again, choose the one that makes the most sense to you in your operation. And then because they are out on pasture, we have a stocking rate, and that's how many cows per acre. So say I've got 50 cows and I put them on X amount of acres, and my stocking rate is going to be 2. And then again, add as many as makes sense to you for your operation. We'll click save. And now when we scroll down, we can see we've got our lactating cows and our dry cows. My total number here is 200, which is what I have in the narrative, right? So you kind of want to make sure that your animal group numbers totals match your general herd size. So again, try not to like double count. And we do have a lot of options in there for different ages of heifers. Again, choose what makes the most sense for you in your operation. All right, we just wrapped up our plan narrative, and now we have 2 options, right? We can go to our nutrient sources by clicking on the step here, or move on to next step. You can see now we came back into it, like I can jump around anywhere in goCrop, but it really is best practice just to kind of go sequentially through as much as you can. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to go step by step. I'm going to use the move on to next step button here. And now that we are in nutrient sources, goCrop defaults us to a manure form. You might not have manure, and that's okay, but maybe you have some fertilizers. You can always change that here in this little drop down. But I'm going to start with manure. And I'm going to say it's a pit. It is not imported. If you do have manure that's imported, you can click yes, and nothing changes too much there. We lose the estimated export total because you're importing it and probably not exporting it. And then we're going to choose the animal type that represents the bulk of the manure going into our pit or our stack, whatever it is. The manure type, if it's liquid, semi-solid, or solid. I think the thing that I want to point out is if you choose one of these, then we have units associated with it. So choose the manure type that best fits how you think about this manure. Is it a liquid and you think about applying it in gallons? Is it a solid and you think about it applying it in tons? Or is it a semi-solid and you think about it sometimes in gallons and sometimes in tons? This matters a bit because of how goCrop uses this information in other parts. So in my example, I'm going to say it's a liquid, talking about this in gallons. And one of the things that we can do in goCrop that we couldn't do before is now we can enter commas, which makes it a lot easier to see how much we're actually putting in, because there can be a lot of zeros. Just some caveats here, right? If you are exporting manure, and let's say that I'm exporting 200,000 gallons. My estimated annual total, and we've got some little help text here. This will describe me a little bit more about that. Just wanted to show you that what these are. I'm going to hide them though because it gets a little bit busy. So let's say based on your herd size, like, all right, my farm generates 1 million gallons, but I export 200,000 gallons. So if that is the case, the actual number you're going to want to put here is 800,000 gallons. And it might be helpful to make a note here saying estimated generated is 1 million gallons, but 200,000 gallons is exported. And if you're at this point and you've written this here, but you didn't put it in your farm narrative, this is a great time to save this, go back to your plan narrative, go back to your manure and describe that, right? I already had put that in here, but upon further discussion, it's like, oh, that's only 200,000, so I'll fix that there. So now that I've saved that, I have a saved nutrient source, and now we have this layout that you'll see a lot in goCrop. We're in our nutrient source tab, and we have some information that is going to pop up in a bunch of our steps, which is if you want to add more sources, you'll click this button. We have these filter options over here. I'm not going to go over those right now. There'll be another time. I think it makes more sense to go over those. And then it's also describing some other neat features, right? Where if I click on this square, I have these options to edit or omit them. I'm not going to go over edit right now. There's another section I think that's a little bit more apt-in. And then you just also said we can omit it here. We can also hover over here on the right side, and it has omit from plan. If you omit something from plan, you can always add it back in. And I can show you how to do that in another step. I just want to pause on that for a moment. And if you are someone who is here and you're thinking about the old goCrop used to have an archive button. That doesn't exist anymore. This has essentially replaced it. And so it's always present in your plan, and you can omit it, which means that you just don't see it, but you can always add it back in. These instructions, again, they're going to be like in every single step to get a little redundant. If you don't want to see them, you can click this X. Once you click this X, you'll see this button that says start this step over. If you start this step over, it just brings you back to what that screen looks like. It doesn't get rid of any of your data. So I click start this step over, ask me if I really want to do it. I say yes, and then I have the instructions back here, but I still have all that data that I just entered. I'm going to close this out. I can also see again what those instructions or help text was by clicking this help text button down here. This is always here to let you know some of the tips and tricks and navigational options that was displayed in that first screen. So like I said, we just created our pit for our nutrient source, and we have the name of it, if it's a manure or fertilizer, how many gallons it holds, and if it is complete, the status is if it's filled in completely or if it's not. I'm going to add a few more fertilizer sources so that we can kind of play around with it a little bit later in nutrient balancing. And so to do that, I'm going to click plus new source, and you're going to change, I always forget this, because it's a fertilizer, you want to change up here the drop down menu so it says fertilizer, right? goCrop every single time is going to default to manure. You just got to change it up above, right? And so now that I've changed it to fertilizer, my form looks a little bit different, right? Default to manure, after it's imported, all this other information. For fertilizer, my form looks different. It's a little bit simpler. So name your fertilizer what's going to make sense to you, and make sure that it's that if you have multiple fertilizers that are similar, that you give it a unique name that you're going to remember. So, I might put one as urea, somebody else might put it as 4600, the analysis. That's fine. You're just putting the name here, whatever makes sense to you. For this, it's dry. You can write any notes here about it, like bought from a particular company, whatever the company name is, or you can leave it blank. This doesn't show up anywhere in the reports. It's just a note for you. Now, since it's a fertilizer, we also ask if it's an organic amendment or contains biosolids. By organic amendment, we don't mean that it's certified organic or that it is another otherwise organic material. What we really mean here, and we'll fix the word on this a little later, is that this is a nitrogen-containing organic amendment, meaning that it has nitrogen that will mineralize over time. So for example, if we apply urea, the assumption is that urea is going to be readily plant available. It doesn't linger on all that long. But if we apply another organic fertilizer, like maybe ProGrow or something like that, that's going to have some nitrogen that will take some time to release and become available to plants. The urea is synthetic, it's not a biosolid, and by biosolid we mean something that has been treated from the sewage system and is being applied to farms. Urea is neither of those, so we're going to click save. I also want to add a couple more fertilizers just so you can see what those look like. So I might have a fertilizer, and I'm going to call this one starter. Maybe you might call it nisan, whatever. But this one we're going to make as a liquid. Again, not organic amendment, doesn't contain biosolids. I'm going to click save for that. And my last one that I want to create, again, for fertilizer, got to go up, change from manure to fertilizer, so I have the correct form. This one we are going to name ProGrow. This is not an endorsement of ProGrow or anything I feel the need to say. It is just that that's what's on my mind right now. And then any notes you have along with that. But here now, right, ProGrow is an organic amendment. So for that, I'm going to click save. I'm going to click yes, it's an organic amendment, and I'm going to click save. So now I've got all 4 of my nutrient sources, and I'm going to continue on. If you find yourself, you know, all the way in nutrient balancing, and you're like, shoot, I actually, you know, have this 5th amendment, or I heard of this new thing and I want to try it, you can always go back to your nutrient sources and add it, and it will show back up in your nutrient balancing when you're adding planned applications of manure and fertilizers. So that is kind of describes us here on this page. And now we're going to go to nutrient analyses. And so we can do that by clicking on the diamond steps or move on to next step. So now we have some help text here. You can import your manure tests and fertilizer analyses. And if you don't have any of this, you can skip it and come back later. This is I'll say this now, and I'll say this again in the soil tests. Right now, we don't have the import function up and running. We're hoping to have that by next week, but we will go over that when it is released, but just sit tight on that for now. And in general, for manure tests, there's not a ton to enter, so it's just as fast to manually enter it as it is to import a test. But so we'll see here, right, that in our nutrient analyses, we've got the name of our nutrient source, what it is, if it's manure or fertilizer, how much our pit holds, and then what type of fertilizer it is, it's dry, liquid, or a gas. And then you'll see over here on the right, they're all due for a test. So this might be due for a test, complete or incomplete, might be the status options you'll see here. And I just want to run through what these look like. So I'm going to start with my pit because that's the first one here. And now that we have a couple of different entries, what you'll see here is we've got the name of my nutrient analyses. I have no matching items because I don't have a manure test entered. I have the status that says it's due for a test. And I have the symbol over here that allows me to return to the list that I was just at, right? So I can click that to get back to this. One of the interesting things about goCrop is if on this step to return to the list, I click this, I can't just click the step and get there, right? I can click on other steps, but not once I'm on that step, I can't click on it. So that's the way to get back to the list when you're looking at a specific part from the list. All right, so we're gonna add a manure test for our pit. To do that, we'll press the little plus button up there. goCrop defaults for us what we need. So here's the pit name, here's the sample date. So you're going to want to put the date the sample was taken. What you might see on your report is when the lab received it and when they reported the results, but the date you really want to report here is the date the sample was taken. We have some help text here. If you want, you can enter the lab that processed your sample. You don't have to, it's totally optional. Any notes about it that you want to. And then based off of your manure analysis report, some of the results. So they'll have dry matter, and then the goCrop defaults to what it needs to have a complete NMP, which is inorganic nitrogen, organic nitrogen, available phosphate, and potash. I would say, and you will see on your manure analysis report a row that says total nitrogen. For goCrop's purposes, ignore that. Especially if it's your first time in goCrop, only enter what it asks for. And this is another time where you can see if what you put in, if your units are matching up, right? Because remember in nutrient sources, I created a pit, I said it was liquid, and because I said it was liquid, now when I enter in my results, it's showing them as pounds per 1,000 gallons. If I had a stack, it would be pounds per wet ton. So if these units are not right here for your nutrient source, go back to your nutrient source and fix the units there. Don't come and change them here. That can cause a little bit of a kerfuffle. So go back to your source if you need to change your units here. And then when you come to enter your manure analysis results, the units will be correct here, and your manure analysis results will match with your nutrient source unit. So we'll save this. And now that I've done that, that shows up here. I can open it, I can edit it from here if I choose to. And now I have an up-to-date sample. And what's really nice is I can just start cycling through and adding analyses for all of my nutrient sources without having to go back to my list every single time. I can just cycle through that with these little carrots. Got one on the left to go forward, and one on the, left to go backwards and right to go forward. I think it's worthwhile pointing out that goCrop doesn't circle your, in this case, like nutrient sources, right? Like I can't go back and get to the thing that was last on my list, which is kind of nice because then you know when you're done going through. It doesn't cycle through. It's kind of like a one to the other situation. And so I am going to add analyses for each one of these because remember we created something that was a little bit different. I'm going to show you what that looks like. So our pro-grow one was our organic amendment. And because it's an organic amendment, it has this nitrogen mineralization rate. In general, an average of mineralization for nitrogen is 30%, meaning like 30% available first year, maybe 30% available second year, and so on. So you'll look at your analyses and you'll put that in here. I'm not sure what the exact analyses for ProGrow here is, so these are just some random numbers. But note how there's not an analysis date, right? Because this is a product that should be consistent, and so there's no date associated with it. If for some reason you have an analysis, a nutrient source that has been consistent for a long time, and all of a sudden, like the formula, I should say all of a sudden, but then the formula changes for it, the analysis changes for it, that's a time to create a new nutrient source and associate that analysis with that nutrient source because the formula's changed. So we'll save that. We're all good to go. Say our starter, we're going to add something to that. And in this case, I might say, okay, it's 10. And because we put the starter as a liquid, we now have we now need to report its density. This is important because it helps us to helps goCrop determine, given a certain rate, how many nutrients are applied. I'm going to click save here. And you notice that since I did not fill all of it out, goCrop's like, hey, wait a minute, you're leaving some blank fields. We need some more information. My recommendation for this is to actually put in, maybe it's zeros, maybe it's another result, but enter that. I would say enter it in as opposed to deleting them. These little red boxes show up where you can delete them. But because goCrop creates a default form for analyses to have all the required information, I suggest just filling out what it's asking for, and you can always enter zeros. For density, look at the tag, look at the label, update that to the correct density for whatever fertilizer you're using. All right, we'll save that there. Now we've got up to D, and our last one is urea, and we'll add a fertilizer analysis for that. This is pretty simple. If your fertilizer analysis does have another nutrient, and this is the key, and you want to track that nutrient, so for example, maybe like you have something you want to add boron to it, you can add that by pressing this add another value, choose the element you want to keep track of, and then enter the unit that it's in, most likely percent, something like that. I'm not going to keep track of this, so I'm going to delete that row by pressing the X button because it's not required. And I'm going to click save. And now that I'm talking about that, that's also making me think about going back to my manure analysis here, right? Is that on your manure analysis report, you have a bunch of other nutrients and information that they give you. That's great, and that can be extremely useful. But I would, at this point, especially if it's your first time, discouraging you from entering any other results other than what goCrop default asks you for. I also like a lot of data, and I sometimes like to include as much as possible. But in this case, adding that extra information just muddies up pages later with information you don't need or you don't care to look at. So just save yourself the time and save yourself like the visual barrage of having a bunch of nutrients that you can see that you don't care about in future pages, but just limiting what you're entering to what goCrop requires. And I know I'm saying a lot of like what goCrop requires, and I think it's really important to emphasize that goCrop is designed to meet 590 NRCS standards and Agency of Ag required agricultural practices. When I'm saying goCrop requires it, what I'm really saying is this is what's needed to meet those basic requirements. All right, so we just finished up our nutrient analyses, and we're going to cruise onto our equipment by move on to next step. Right now in goCrop, the only, and when we move on to equipment, it defaults us to the form. And right now in goCrop, the only equipment we can enter is spreaders. That's for spreading your manure. So use the spreader name that makes the most sense to you. That could be the kind of manure it's spreading, that could be the company name, or some other cutesy name you have for your manure spreading device. And you're going to choose what it spreads, whether it's liquid, semi-solid, or solid. And again, that could match with your nutrient sources. The size. So we do have some help text here. I'll kind of put that up here. But for size, what we want to know here, not necessarily is like what is its total capacity, but on average, what you fill it up to, right? So you might have a tank that holds 10,000 gallons, and for whatever reason, you only fill it up to 8,000. That's the number that should go here, because goCrop's going to use this number if you're recording applications by loads. So it's important that this number is correct. And then we're going to, the next question is if it is calibrated or not. To meet 590 or Agency of Ag required agricultural practices standards, your spreader needs to be calibrated. And so that means that going a certain speed with a certain opening, that this is the rate that's going on the field. If you need help with this, I think folks from NRCD can help, folks from Extension can. Extension has scales, portable scales to help you calibrate your machine. But your equipment needs to be calibrated in order for it to meet the standards. And then we have this question of if it's custom applied or not. Are you paying a custom applicator to spread this manure for you? I would encourage you to enter all the spreaders, right? It's part of the requirement. And in particular, maybe you spread some manure, but you hire a custom applicator for others. it would be really helpful to enter in the manure spreaders as a custom applicators as well, because goCrop creates a report for you where you say, okay, I want to spread 8,000 gallons per acre on this field, and goCrop will generate a report that says, okay, based off of that, based on your spreaders, this is how many loads you need to meet that goal that you've set for your application rate. All right, so we've entered a spreader. I'm going to click save, and now we have that same layout that we did for the other step too, where we have this help text, and we've got our spreader name, how many gallons it holds, and if it is complete or not. I'm not going to enter any more equipment for this, but you could enter, maybe you have stuff for solid manure or whatever other spreading equipment you have. Enter that here by pressing this plus new equipment button up here. Okay, that was a lot of intro to get to field. So we're going to embark on that next. So I'm going to move on to my next step, and it defaults to the field form. And here we're just going to start entering our field information. We've got some help text here that'll open up for you. And one of the help texts here says that, you know what, if you know your field name or your tracking field number, you really only need to know one of those to continue on, enter more information for that field. But you have both those pieces of information at the same time, it's great to enter them. So you're going to enter the field name for whatever makes sense to you, and then you're going to enter the track and field names. So you might have a track that you might have a field that has multiple fields, like FSA field numbers on it, and you can enter those all here. And you need to enter all of them here if they're associated with whatever you just named your field in that land base. So in this case, maybe there's 2 or 3 that FSA track and field numbers that are associated with my field. And notice that as I enter in the fields, goCrop's like, okay, but you need to enter in the track too. And as I enter in the track, a new option to enter additional appear below. I don't need to press a plus button to them. But for this one, I'm like, oh, actually, it's only, fields 1 and 2 from FSA. It's not actually 3. So I'm going to delete that by pressing the red button here. And then we'll put the size of your field in here. We do have an option to map out the field. And it's really important to say here that the acreage that you map out in this field isn't calculated. Like you're putting a line in a map. It doesn't calculate the acreage for you. So you really do need to have some way of knowing what your acres are for every field that's not associated with this map below. Our next question is if it is owned or leased, and we'll say this one is owned. You can write any notes you want for this field, but again, these notes don't show up on reports. You don't have to map your fields, but it's really, really helpful. Partially because in our land info step, goCrop will pull a bunch of soil series information from your map field, so you don't have to manually enter it. And it can also be just like a nice visual, especially if you're working with other people, of where your field is. So you can keep it in the small screen to create your field. I think it's too tiny for me to work in that. So I'm going to show you that you can enlarge your screen by pressing the square in the upper right-hand corner of the map. And then you can press down, for me anyway, on my left mouse button, keep that mouse button held in, and you can kind of pan around. And then you can use the flywheel, the little scroll wheel on your mouse to zoom in to a field. And I'm just picking a random field here to outline. I don't know who this is, so it's very random here. And you can tell, hopefully you can see that my cursor kind of has like this little hash mark on it, like it's a little, I don't know, almost cross-like thing. And what that means, right, and I can see this in my upper piece here, is that it's ready to draw a polygon. It's ready to create a shape. And so every time I click my mouse, it'll drop a pin or drop a dot, and a line will connect those dots. So I'm going to connect this to this and kind of outline my field here. You can get as detailed as you want here. I'm kind of dropping a bunch of dots to make it really outlined. If you have like a funny little dip out, you can carve it there. or maybe you've created a polygon, you're like, oh, that does not look like what I meant it. I actually want this whole thing outlined, because it'll save as soon as you connect the dots. You can fix it by dragging this dot back here, clicking on the dot and then dragging it back. If you're like, this is not at all what I want my field outline to look like, you can trash it here. And then it brings me back to the map I was just at. And just to walk through this again, I created my screen big by creating this little, by clicking on the little box outline. I clicked my left, I'm trying to figure this out, my left mouse button to scroll around. I picked the field that I called first. This is my first field. And then to outline it, I dropped a dot around the perimeter of my field. Once I close my polygon, close my shape, right? Like you can see if I drop a dot here, I've got the hash marks, but to close it, my mouse cursor changes from like that cross mark to a hand. And once I click here, that's going to close my shape, close my polygon, close my field perimeter, and it will automatically save it for me. So there's that. So I saved, like goCrop has this shape saved, but now I need to save my field information. So I'll do that here. I'm going to take a moment. And now we see our steps just like we did in the previous ones. We have this help information, and we've got my first field with my tracking field in it. I'm going to create really quickly a few more fields so that you can see what they look like. Just one other piece here too. Notice that the polygon that I created of the field that I'm on is red. I'm going to go back because I don't want to change anything here to my previous screen. I'm going to close out my help text just to clean things up. Or not here. This is a bug we're encountering in the wild where I can't close that. That's okay. We're going to move on to our new field. And I'm going to call this second. You know, folks might have things like this side of the brook or field out back or whatever. Whatever it makes sense for the farmer to name it that. I'm going to say this is 2, 15 is owned. And now that I have a field, goCrop centers the map on the field that I created. And the fields that are not of this field are orange. So if I want to outline a different field for this new field that I'm calling second, I can just pan over and draw it in. And the one that I draw in, the field of the field I'm on is in red and all the other fields are in orange. All right, I'm going to save this and just a few more here. There we go. Part of the reason why I'm taking some extra time to do this because it'll help us in some of the other steps or some cool features I'd like to go over. Okay, so notice that I have the status of complete and complete for first and second, but incomplete for third. So that's telling me that this isn't, it's not done yet. I'm going to create one more field here. And I'm going to leave it unmapped. So I do want to point out that mapping is not required, right? So goCrop is still saying that it's complete because goCrop has all the information it needs to create your 590 standard from the information that it's asking for here. Mapping is not required to meet the requirements for a 590 standard NMP. I'm going to take this moment now just to talk about these filtering options. It's not so helpful here per se, but if you were working with someone that's got like 40 fields and there's a huge long list of them, and what you really want to know is which fields are complete or incomplete just to knock that stuff out, you can filter by that. And so one thing that goCrop is showing right now is what is included. And that's because none of these fields are omitted. So if I omit my third field, my incomplete field, I omit it by this little negative or minus button, goCrop saying, okay, I'm only showing what's included. And it also says, oh, I've got items hidden by filters. So if I clear my filters, I will see all of the information, including what's not included in the plan. If I want to add something into the plan that was previously admitted for whatever reason, then I can just add this little plus button here. Right, we're kind of on a little side quest here, planning just to kind of talk about filtering systems here. So now it's showing that it's incomplete. It's all, and all of my fields are in there, even though I'm showing all. So we have these three different filter options. One is we can see our filter controls, we can search for a particular thing, and we can also sort by, alphabetical order, for example, by ascending or descending. So that just kind of looks like this. And then our search button, if we're like, well, I really just want to find the second field and I'm having a hard time finding it, you can type it in. These two, kind of useful sometimes, particularly maybe searching in the record function can be really helpful. But otherwise, I think that this filter button, this little upside down pyramid, can be really helpful. And this is where I can say, I only want goCrop to show what's included. So only the things that I that aren't omitted, the things I want in my plan, and if things are incomplete. So I only want to see what's incomplete so I can just focus on finishing that up. Then I'll click done here. And wait, where the sorting, I don't need to see that right now. So I got rid of that by pressing the X button there. And now it's just showing third because that's the thing that's incomplete. I'm going to quickly finish that up by just entering a random track number and clicking apply from 2026 onwards, which is really a save button. It says this has been updated and saved in goCrop. We get that little toast. I found out that these little pop-ups are called toasts because toast pops up, which I thought was kind of cute. So now my status of my third field is complete. If I come back to my list, I have no fields here listed because I asked goCrop to only show me the incomplete ones. All my fields are complete, so nothing's showing here. So what I'm going to do is get rid of the incomplete filter function so that I can see all my fields that are included in the plan. In general, when you're in your plan, it's just best practice to make sure that you are showing what's included. Otherwise, it can get really cluttery if you've deleted or omitted a bunch of things. Not deleted, but omitted. And just really quick, you can always get to that filter controls here. And once you've, goCrop chooses what it shows in real time. So I don't really have a bunch of different options here, but if I had my incomplete and I chose complete, it would only show me the complete ones on the side. And then you have a bunch of ways of getting out of the filter option here. It's the X, the done, or you can just click outside of this box. So that is helpful when you have a long list of things and you really want to filter for different things. All right, so we're completed that for our field information, and we're going to move on to our next step, which is our land info. Again, we've got some information here. That's some help text. It hasn't changed much in the last few steps. I'm just going to close that to clean it up. And let's see what we have for our first field and land info we're going to enter. So this is really helpful that we've mapped out our field information or our field. So now we can say for our soil information, like what are our dominant soil type, the drainage class, hydrologic group, so forth, goCrop can pull that from Surgo. And to get goCrop to pull all this information from Surgo, we'll say field based on field map. If you don't want to do that, you can also click this drop-down menu and choose the soil type that is most applicable to that field. If you choose dominant soil type and you don't see the codes that you are expecting to see, it could be that goCrop is pulling that information from a different county. For whatever reason, counties have different soil series codes from each other. And goCrop, remember when we were creating our plan, we said this is the county that we're operating from. That's what goCrop is looking for to generate these crop codes. So if these don't match what you were expecting to, click change county, choose the county that this field is in, right? Because you might have some farm fields in one county and some in another. And then that will change, that can change the codes that appear. But for us, or for today, in our purposes, I'm just going to fill it based on the map. It's always good practice to double check your soil series fact sheet and that this matches what was actually on your fact sheet. And not all information from the soil series fact sheet is pulled into goCrop from Sturgo. And notably, that's depth to bedrock. That is something that you will need to look up and manually enter that is on the soil series fact sheet. And then, so choose the one that makes the most sense to you. And then we have these other pieces to enter, nitrogen leaching index, which is something that your technical assistance provider can help you find, along with the tolerable soil loss, which comes from the soil series fact sheet, but isn't auto-generated. And then the elevation of the field and distance to stream. I'm going to apply this from 2026 onward. And I'm going to go back to my field list, and I'm going to see that that is complete. So one really neat streamlined thing that we've put in land info is that you have the ability to bulk edit. And this can be really helpful if, let's say that you've got a bunch of fields and let me back up. So what bulk editing essentially does is it allows you to change an information box, the same information box on multiple fields. So for example, if my first, fourth, and second fields all have similar information in a particular setting, in a particular box, I can bulk edit them. So I'll click the ones that I want to edit, I'll click edit, and then I'll come here and say, okay, well, my elevation has multiple values because I entered an elevation for one of them and not the rest. But really, they're all at 950 feet. So the key here is that once I put a number here, it'll overwrite all the other information I have for the others. In this case, that's okay, because I know these three fields all have the same elevation. I don't think my tolerable soil loss is that might depend on soil series, so I'm not going to mess around with that in this demo. It might make sense for you in your field. Or nitrogen, but nitrogen leaching index might be another one that is just really similar across all across a lot of your fields. I'm going to do that all at once here. And then distance to stream might also change depending on your field. So this is nice that I at least can enter these two pieces of information for all three of those fields at once. You might have some fields that are the exact same. And if that's the case for this information, unlikely but possible, I also want to show you the copy function. So that means that it'll overwrite all the information for the land info step from one field to another. I will say that's a little bit clunky because you're choosing what you're copying to first. So I think I'll click my third field, and once I click in this box, I have the option to copy, and so I'll click copy, and then it'll say I'm copying to the third field. I mean, because it's blank, and I want to copy from the first field, and it will copy everything I put in the first field to the third field, overwriting any information I have in third. I haven't entered anything in third, but if you did, it would be overwritten. I'm going to copy that now. So my first and my fourth, they're both complete because I copied them. And my first and my third are complete because I copied my first to my third. But my fourth and my second are incomplete because I haven't entered any of the soil information in there. One thing to note is that goCrop will keep your field checkmarked no matter if you're like bounced between steps or not. It just keeps that checked. So if you do use a bulk edit or a copy function, make sure that you always uncheck so that you're not accidentally including it in future bulk edits or copy functions when you don't mean to. For the purposes of this tutorial, I'm not going to go through and fill in the rest of this information for the land info, but real quick, just in case we don't get back to it later, if we go back to the dashboard, right, we can see that we completed all of these, all the information's filled in, but land info is now incomplete, it's in progress. And we haven't started any of the others. So we have this nice little checklist to let us know when we do come back where we can pick up off on. But now I'm going to go to soil tests. And I'm really going to lean into just sticking with the first field. But as you're doing this, it might make sense for you to like stick on a particular step and do that step for every single field before moving on to the next one. I was trying to give a high level overview of what each step looks like. I guess I'm being more detailed than high level, but here we are. So I'm going to go into our first. It says it's due for a soil test. I'm in my soil test step. And we'll click that. And just like we saw right for the nutrient sources or nutrient analyses, we have this add a soil test here. So it's due for a test. We're going to add a soil test. And it tells us what field I'm in. I don't have any crops planned for it. And then we're going to put the sample date in here. And again, just like the manure analyses, you might see in your report when the soil test was received or when the soil sample was received and when the results were reported. What we want here is the date that it was actually sampled. I'm picking a random date. Again, we have some help text here. You can enter the lab if you want to, or leave it blank. It's all good. I'm going to get rid of the help text to keep it from getting too busy. And then we have these default results, right? Just like in the manure analysis, your soil test analysis is going to have a bunch of different results for different elements and different parts of your soil. For now, first time in goCrop, just enter what goCrop is asking you for, what is required of you, or required to meet the requirements of 590 standard and the required agricultural practices. I'm going to put in some random numbers here. And I would also say goCrop also defaults to the units, so don't mess around with those. Just keep these things as is. If you click on nutrients, you'll see phosphorus, but you'll also see available phosphate. Just click with phosphorus, or stay with phosphorus, to stay with what goCrop defaults to meet the requirements. Again, just like your manure analyses report, your soil test analyses report will have more information. Again, just stick with what goCrop's asking you to put in. Otherwise, it's really going to muddy the waters later. You'll just see a lot more information that you don't plan on managing for. So this is that. And you'll do this for each one of your fields. Again, you can kind of click through, add the soil test, and go in sequential order. And especially if this is your first time, you might have like 20 soil tests. I'm hoping that an import function will be ready for you so you don't have to do this manually. So just sit tight on that because we might be able to save you a little bit of time, but I just wanted to show you what it looked like to add a soil test manually. If you only have a couple to enter, real fast, real simple, it's all good. Now we've entered one, it's complete, and it's up to date. All right, we're going to move on to risk management. I can do that by clicking on the step here or move on to next step over here. Again, we have the same help text here. This is just in case you're coming back to it after a while, just to give you a little bit of a refresher. We've been here, so I'm going to close it. Keep it a little bit tidy. And our risk management, again, right, we see here is our field list, our track and field name, and that it's blank. We haven't started it yet. So I'm going to open it up, and now we have a bunch of questions that, and a lot of this goes into the P index and might be consistent across a lot of your fields. So There's a lot of help text here to help you know what goCrop or what the required agricultural practices are looking for. And so for this, the vegetated buffer width. So it's asking for what is the distance from the shortest distance from the edge of stream to your edge of field, right? So you can imagine that your field's not a straight line and the stream's not a straight line. So what's the space that's like the shortest distance for that? If you want more information on what to put down for vegetative buffer width or for manure spreading setback, if you look at the actual P-index spreadsheet, they do have some examples in one of the tabs there. But in general, at a minimum, no matter what crop you're planting or where you're planting it, that vegetative buffer width, which needs to be perennial vegetation, should be a minimum of 25 feet. So if you have a stream and you have a hay field, your field goes right up to that stream, but that's hay, so it's perennial. And so you still have 25 feet of buffer that you're not applying manure into, right? No fertility goes there, but that's what this vegetated buffer width is. And then in addition to your vegetated buffer width, you have a manure spreading setback. So it's anything beyond the 25, 50, 200 feet that might be there. For some folks, just coming back to the vegetated buffer width, you might have 200 feet of riparian buffer, trees, scrub, whatever, between your edge of stream and your edge of field. In that case, put 200, but just to reiterate, at a minimum, this number should be 25. So then the manure spreading setback, right, that's anything in addition to that 25 feet. Most fields the fields on most farms that I've worked with, this number is normally 0, almost always. There are a few folks who are like, you know what, I've got that field and it's really wet at the bottom, and so I actually do have another like 50 feet on top of that, or it's sloped, and so I just to be cautious and be responsible, I'm having manure spread setback on top of my vegetative buffer width. But for most folks, that's going to be 0. Has living vegetation in April, you're going to mark this if it's a hay field, if it's a pasture field, or if you typically get a really good winter cover crop that survives the winter. Like that would also count as living vegetation in April. Has pattern tile drainage. So pattern tile drainage is what we're asking for, right? Is that it's not just one tile piece here and one over there to drain a couple low pieces. It's a pattern. It's every 25 feet, every 30 feet, or 15 or whatever. So you got some orphan tile lines. That is not pattern tile drainage. Yes, you have tile drainage, but no, you do not have pattern tile drainage. So choose what makes what actually fits for your farm. Maybe no, it could be yes. Frequently flooded comes from a map. This is a designation, so please contact your technical assistance provider if you need clarification if your fields are frequently flooded or not. If you see the map and it's designated as frequently flooded and you're like, that's just not true, you can go to the Agency of Ag website to clarify that on their end as well. Sediment trap structure, you can ignore this. This is a holdover from a previous requirement, and we just haven't gotten rid of it yet. Water quality considerations, you can leave this blank. You can say NA if you don't have any water quality considerations. Otherwise, things in here might be like stream, drinking well, anything that you think would be helpful for you to remember, or a custom applicator or somebody new coming on your farm, that there's a sensitive water feature there that needs to be considered. So I've done this. I'm going to click save, and it says, yep, I've saved all my information here. If I want to, I can click through and keep adding. But you might have a situation, right, where, again, the rest of your fields are all the same. You can bulk edit those and enter in all that information for all of them all at once, and this can just save a lot of time. So especially we used to have to do this all one by one, even though the information was very similar, and now I've just finished that in like, I don't know, less than 2 minutes, 3 different entries. Great. So now we're going to move on to our next step for our crop rotations, and we'll just start with the first. And I'm going to create a couple different crop rotations so you know what those look like. So one example might be corn silage, or say corn silage with cover crop. And in this example for my first field, it's always corn silage, and it's always corn silage with cover crop. Always. Has been, will be, forever. And yes, I know things change, and maybe 5 years from now you might want to rotate, but for now, with what you know now, this field is going to be continuous corn. So you'll have one number to enter, right? So my rotation year, I'm going to have my crop, and then I have my annual loss. And this is from a Russell 2 value revised universal soil loss equation. So you're going to enter one value because it's continuous corn. And down below, goCrop will ask you, well, what year in rotation is it? It's continuous corn, so it's going to stay continuous corn with cover crop the entire time. And then I'll enter my average soil loss. My average soil loss for the entire rotation, because it's continuous corn, is going to be 1.2 tons. We've done that. I'm going to save that. And now I've completed this. My little status has changed. I want to move on to the next one. For my next one, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to say, okay, what we actually have here is hay. I'm going to have continuous hay, always hay. And my Russell 2, my annual soil loss is some number like 0.002 or something like that, kind of random numbers. Again, I'm going to choose my current year in rotation. I only have one option because I've only chosen one thing because it's continuous. And then my rotation average soil loss is the same as my year, right? Because it's the same thing over and over again. And then I'm going to leave fourth blank, and I'm going to leave second blank, and I'm going to go on to third. And for third, I'm going to show that I have a rotation. And one way that I find it easy for me to navigate a rotation that has multiple years is to put all of the years of my crop in first, and then enter my annual soil loss. So like, all right, I'm doing corn silage cover crop, maybe 4 years of that. And then maybe 6 years of hay for a 10-year rotation, right? And every time I add one, goCrop automatically adds an option to add a second one below. You don't have to press a plus button. It just kind of does it for you, which is great. So I'm just going to keep going through and adding these. And then I can look at the numbers from the printout of what my yearly loss is associated with each one of these years in my rotation. If you don't know what I'm talking about here, reach out to your technical assistance provider to make sure that the numbers you're entering here match the correct Russell 2 value for the field you're in, for the rotation you want to use, and also the year that you're in. So in this example, I'm starting with my first year of corn silage after a hay rotation, and or coming out of hay. I'm just throwing in some random numbers here of what the predicted annual loss is based off of this revised universal soil loss equation, the Russell 2 annual soil loss. And again, just for the sake of time, throwing some random numbers here. And now remember I said, oh, I want to do this as a 10-year rotation. And I've got my 4 years of corn, and now I'm counting here. I'm like, oh, I just went really quick, and I added a 7th year of hay. I didn't mean to do that. So to get rid of that, I'm just going to click this X button. If you find that you've created a rotation and you know, your numbers are all off, or you need to delete a part of it, just make sure that your corresponding values match the year and the rotation it's associated with. I guess what I'm trying to say here is, like, sometimes I need to delete a second year hay rotation, and then that kind of makes these numbers null, and I need to re-update them. So just, you know, when you're entering this, it can be a lot, but just make sure, again, that you're in the right field, using the right rotation, because sometimes a printout of Russell 2 is going to have multiple different rotation options for a field. and then make sure you're entering the tons per acre that might be lost under this management practice with the correct year in the rotation. There's a lot that goes into this Russell 2 number, and if you're curious about it, please reach out to your technical assistance provider. Right, so then you're going to choose your year in rotation, whichever one your field is in. We'll make this maybe first year, second year in hay. So now we're a Russell 2 rotation average soil loss. What that means for this is that we're going to take the average of these 10 values and put that here. And so if you delete one of these, if you omit one of these years in the rotation, you might need to update your rotation average soil loss. I'm use some random numbers here. I'm not going to go through and like tally them all up and create an average. So the number I'm putting here is it's just a random number, which is not going to be 21.6 or even that. Okay, nope. All right, I'm going to save that. So now I'm complete here. If I go back to my field list, I can see I've got 3 of my 4 fields are complete, and I'm leaving my second one blank. If you have fields that have really similar rotations or the same rotation or like the same crops but different Russell 2 values, that can be another time when you're first starting before you enter in all your information to use one of the bulk edit buttons. Actually, I said that now, but now I'm saying don't use the bulk edit buttons and rotations. It's really not conducive to having year by year changes. So just ignore that. But you can copy. So if like you entered here in our fourth, I've got continuous hay here. And my second also has continuous hay. Maybe I had 3 other fields that have continuous hay with the same loss values. This is another great example to use the copy function. So again, I'm going to choose what I want to copy to, and then I choose my plan, and I choose what I want to copy from, and I think it was my fourth field might have had hay or something like that. I don't remember, but the copy function can be really helpful here if you do have fields that have multiple rotations or the same rotation in multiple fields. Sorry, I'm on like hour 2 here, so I feel like I'm like muddling my words here a little bit. To encapsulate here, 4 crop rotations. The edit feature, not very helpful. The copy feature can be helpful if you have fields that have the same rotations and the same soil loss. So it'll just copy exactly what we had in our fourth into our second or whatever fields you choose, and you can copy from the same field to multiple fields at a time. So this used to take a bunch of time, but if you know that the same fields have the same rotation, make one, and then check the ones you want that to copy that to, and then go to your copy button and continue on. Do you have any questions about how some of these tips can be helpful? And feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to like walk you through those in the moment at the time to make that happen, because I can save a lot of time once you know how to do it. All right, I'm going to uncheck this because we don't want to follow this through. And I'm going to go to crops and nutrient balancing. And I know we only have about 4 minutes left, but I also think I'm going to power through and just hit on crops and nutrient balancing. So I think I can do that in 10 to 15 minutes. And then we can also touch on records and farm assets. So if you need to head out because we're hitting time, just know that we're going to go over those, and that this recording will be posted online and you can have access to it later and to review these pieces. And also my contact information is available. So if you need more support, feel free to reach out. But we're going to go on to crops. Again, same layout like we've seen with all the steps, and we're going to hide the help text, and we've got the help text is just going to come back. So this is one of those other things. Okay, there we go. Got our field names, our track and field number, and then none because we haven't designated any crops, and it's blank. So just sticking with the first, I'm going to add a new crop. Let's see. And add a new crop here. And first we're going to choose the type, if it's annual or if it's perennial. So perennial is going to be your permanent hay, grazing, or just like any grass really that you're not tilling. Annual for things that are going to get tilled, some of your row crops and the like. Then you're going to choose your crop. We've got this long list of things. I'm going to choose corn silage. And then we have this help text to help guide us how much surface cover percent we have. For corn silage, that's about 15. For corn silage, there's 0 legume in that because we're just talking about corn silage. You might be like, oh, I've got a cover crop with legume, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're just talking about corn silage. I will say, I'm not going to go into hay crops right now, but I will say that having an accurate legume content for your hay crop is important because at the end of the day, this legume content does impact nitrogen recommendations. All right, so then we have cultural practices, which is, these 5 here. You can click grown with cover crop. If you are going to go a cover crop with the corn silage, and maybe it's no-till, you can click those. These show up in your reports, but they don't talk to anything in goCrop, right? So like in your crop rotations, we had to designate corn with cover crop. So to make that Russell to value correspond accurately, or to describe that Russell to value accurately, to the extent that it can be described accurately. All right, and so then we have these other questions here, like if it's a cover crop, if this crop will be harvested or grazed, planting from overwinter from the previous year or overwinter the next year. In general, you can ignore these. I think it's great for crops to check your cultural practices you're using. This nurse crop is really helpful to indicate if you are growing a hay crop and when you receive your hay crop, use a nurse crop like oats or something like that to help cover that ground for a little bit while that perennial forage is establishing. All right, so now that we've entered a crop, we see a lot of red, right? We see that our corn silage is incomplete. We also see that our crop details are complete with what we just entered. And we also see that our corn silage recommendations has errors. And what's really nice here is that goCrop says, well, it has errors and it has them because book values are required. And in order to get those book values to automatically generate, we need to add a yield and a harvest plan, right? So these things are all connected to the fact that we haven't entered what our anticipated yield is. So I'm going to press add here. It tells us that we're in corn silage, that's what we did, and then we're going to put what the anticipated yield is. So this is a little bit it's a little bit tricky sometimes to enter this because anticipated yield can be like, all right, so I normally get, let's say 18 tons per acre off of this field, but I know, given my soil type, that if I added more fertility, I might actually get more like 20 tons per acre. So this is a conversation to think about and have when it's, what are your records and then what is this field actually capable of producing based off of more fertility, if it had more fertility. And this matters because, I've worked with some folks and I'm like, yeah, this hayfield, it always gets 2 acres. But then the question is, well, what if we fertilized it for 3? Would it get 3 acres? And that conversation might be like, yeah, that hasn't gotten any manure or urea or whatever in years. It's limited by the amount of nutrients. On the other hand, some folks I work with, I'm like, hey, that's 2 tons. Does that seem right? And they're like, oh yeah, because of that soil type, that's what it's ever capable of producing. And you can verify that with a soil series fact sheet. So just there is some nuance here in what's put here. And then number of harvests, if it's a corn silage field, you can leave it blank. Obviously, grazing also blank. But if it is a hay field, this number does matter for number of harvests, how many times you often go out there to get it, because that does impact nitrogen recommendations. So corn silage, a little bit more straightforward, but for a hay crop, the legume content you enter impacts nitrogen recommendations as well as the number of harvests. So make sure that you're reflecting what's there as much as you can. And click save. And now that I've put in my yield and my harvest plan, my recommendations automatically populate and my corn silage crop is complete. If for whatever reason you think that your corn silage recommendations are inaccurate or need to be bumped up for whatever reason, maybe they're no-till and you don't, the goal just, I guess what I'm trying to say is you can overwrite the book values. I would discourage it your first time around. But one way you know that goCrop is using book values is because it tells you it's using book values. If you change, you change this amount, we know that because then it just says complete. But to get back to goCrop book values based off of the nutrient recommendations guidebook, to that we click the recommendations, we open that up, and then it's not very intuitive, but we're just going to delete all of those rows and we click save. It says it's incomplete. Say we'll add another. Oh wait, actually I want to trash it. That's what I want to do. I'm going to delete it that way. And now goCrop says, well, there wasn't anything for me to pull from. You didn't enter anything. So now I'm going to go back to book values. So I did that a little bit wonky, but just to go over that again, if for whatever reason the recommendations are changed and you want to go back to book values, you open it, and we know we're not in book values because it says complete, not book values. We're going to open that up, trash it. It's going to say, are you sure you want to delete it? We'll delete it, and then goCrop will then automatically generate those book values again. So really, really helpful things here. Okay. So now we've entered in all this information and all of this, because this is a nutrient management planning tool, we're finally getting to nutrient balancing. So I'm going to click on that, our next step. And we can see, right, we've got our field names, checking field numbers, what crop we have there, and if it's started or not. And before I do that, one helpful thing to make sure matches up is that your crop, right, I've got corn silage in my first field, matches the crop that I have designated in my rotation, right? There are some ways to check this a little bit later, but just to reiterate, before we get to nutrient balancing, just make sure things are buttoned up. We want to make sure that the crop we created in our field matches the crop that we indicated in our rotation, right? And one of the nice things about this is that I'm in fourth field here in crop. I go to crop rotations, I'm in fourth field, I can check that, right? I can scroll through and say, all right, in my rotations in second, I'm in hay, and in my crops, I haven't entered anything. But right, so I'm in first, corn silage, go to crop rotation, first corn silage, it matches. So this is one thing that can be helpful to do before you move on to nutrient balancing, which we're finally going to do. All right, so this is our nutrient balancing page, and there's a lot happening here, right? We have our whole entire table here. We've got recommended, past years, manure, fertilizer, total credits, and balance, right? So our recommended is generated based off of the crop we chose and our soil test and some other information. Past years refers to past year's credits, like particularly nitrogen that's been applied from organic sources, whether that's manure or organic fertilizer source. This is planned credits for manure applications, and then planned fertilizer credits for nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and lime if there's a lime recommendation because your pH is low. And then your total credits. How much nutrients is this field planning on receiving, whether it's from past year's mineralizations or this year's applications, and then the balance against the soil test recommendation. Below that, we have this nutrient and risk indices. We got our nitrogen leaching index, right? That's what we enter way back, I think, in risk management, maybe land info. Our soil phosphorus is our soil test phosphorus that we entered in soil test. And then our Vermont P index, which, if you look at this, this is the is an amalgamation of a bunch of things that we've entered from all over. One of the things about the nutrient risk indices is that you can't click on NLI or soil phosphorus for more information, but the P index is a value with an interpretation that has a lot going into it. So you can just open that up and see, just for transparency, all the information you've entered from other places and what the P index is using to generate its value and also its interpretation. This P index, although it's based off of a lot of different land information or field information, it's also impacted by manure applications, planned manure applications. So this value and interpretation can increase with the amount of manure that is applied that contains phosphorus. Not just manure, but fertilizer, any fertilizer sources containing phosphorus. The other navigational piece I want to talk about here is that right now, what we see on the right is silage recommendations, credits, planned manure applications, planned grazing manure, and planned fertilizer applications, all on the right. Depending on what your screen looks like, all of these things could be below. So if you don't have this side by side and you want to have this side by side, but your screen is smaller, you might be able to make that happen by collapsing your menus. But either way, that information is there. It just might be below. You can also kind of filter what you see here because all of these pieces that are on the right are also associated with the row on the left. So if I want to see just what goes in the generating my recommendations, I can click that row. I can bring back all that information by clicking on the row that's highlighted, and it's kind of like you can barely see that there's like an outline around it. And you can kind of cycle through. So I can see if there's any past year's credits, or it'll filter to just what things I can fill out. So when you are creating a new plan, it is important to account for past year nitrogen containing applications from organic sources that mineralize over time. You can do that two ways. You can enter them in your records, or you can enter them in using this credits from 2025. And it's kind of similar, but not quite. Like in records, you enter an exact date and some other pieces. But if you want to enter in any applications from 2025 into your 2026 plan from manure, let's say, you choose your manure type. If you haven't entered a record, you enter the total manure applied on a per tons per acre basis, liquid, so let's say 6,000. And then I'd have to refer to my test, the one that most accurately reflects this year, and type that in. And then it'll show you the calculation below that based off of the amount of organic nitrogen, the amount I'm applying, and how long ago I applied it, it'll say, okay, well, we think this calculates out to 5.3 pounds. And then it'll adjust that for the past year. It is important too that if you are rotating from hay to corn ground or another annual crop, to also capture that. And that's something you would also enter in as a credit. So credits for the year 2024, I'm going to say, well, 2 years ago, it's corn now, but 2 years ago, it was a high yielding grass crop. And it'll tell me what that is projected. The first year I till that in or otherwise terminate it. The grass is 70 pounds per acre, and then 2 years after it's 30. And so now my past years here are showing 33, right? 3.1 from the manure I applied last year, and 30 pounds from the hay crop I terminated 2 years ago. And from there, I start adding manure applications that I plan on applying to my corn crop. And so I choose when my first manure application is going to be. And again, it's a range. I choose my manure source, my anticipated average, and then if I'm going to incorporate it or not. If you choose incorporation, then you choose time to incorporation, which can either be in hours or in days or immediate. Save there. And so notice now, right, like before I added any of this application, my Vermont P index was in the low interpretation, but now that I'm adding more manure, I'm adding a phosphorus containing fertilizer, I should say, that's more phosphorus going onto the ground, so the risk of phosphorus leaving my field increases, and the value then increases in the interpretation if that changes. At this moment, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go over the nuances of creating a nutrient management balance that balances to meet the requirements. I think suffice to say, like, this 60 pounds over with a medium interpretation probably doesn't meet the requirements. But I would really encourage, if you're working with a technical assistance provider, to make sure that they review it, or if you're a new technical assistance provider, reach out to someone in extension or someone who has a little bit more experience with looking at these balances. But there's a lot of nuance and a lot of back and forth to getting this number to be correct. And that I want to focus more on like how goCrop works versus the nuance of that in this moment in this demonstration. But you have my contact information. If you have questions about it, feel free to reach out. So we've done one planned manure. You can keep on adding others. I'm going to click on fertilizer just to, screen for what I see on my screen so I don't get too many other things there. And then I can add my fertilizer applications too, just like I did for my manure applications, choosing the approximate date or time range that I plan on adding my fertilizer. This will be like side dress, so in June, and then choose the rate, probably in pounds per acre, because I indicated that it was dry. And if it was a liquid, it would default to gallons per acre. Choose our application type, whatever makes the most sense to you, and then the incorporation method as well for this plant fertilizer application. So now I've gone over recommended, how to enter past year's applications, how to enter a manure application or fertilizer, the total credits, right? It's adding up all of these past year and planned applications and the balance against the recommended. If I want to see everything that I entered here again on the right, because I'm filtering just by the fertilizer piece, I can unclick that. Then I can see everything that I've done, right? My recommendations, my credits, manure application I planned, the fertilizer application I planned, plus the ability to add more planned manure applications and more planned fertilizers applications. This is your first time in goCrop. I'd recommend just ignoring, if you've got a pasture, ignoring the planned grazing manure. And part of that is that when you choose pasture in crops, the automatic generation of those nutrient recommendations is taking the fact that it's pastured into account. It's already reducing the nitrogen recommendation because it's assuming that it's getting nutrients from the manure and urine of your livestock. So just ignore this for now, the planned grazing manure. One thing that we don't have here that may be useful when you are balancing your nutrients is also being able to see the balance of planned nutrients by crop removal. And that's particularly helpful when we're thinking about meeting requirements that meet the Vermont P index. We don't have that line in here. So now I'm going to show you how to add that back in. So to do that, we're going to actually go back to our dashboard, go to edit settings, go to show advanced, and we're going to drop down here, we're going to say include crop removal and nutrient balances, and we're going to say yes. We're going to save that. And now when we go back to nutrient balancing, I go to my corn silage, I now have this additional row where it says balance removal, and now it's balancing against the projected amount of nutrient removal based off of your crop type and your anticipated yield. So there's a lot going on here. I'm sure you have a bunch of questions, but I think I'm going to leave that here for now. With a caveat too, right? Like you might be here and you're like, oh, I didn't know any of my fields needed lime. I'm interested in applying lime this year, but I don't have that in any of my nutrient sources. We go back to nutrient sources, add your new source, add your analysis. Once you do that, you can go back to nutrient balancing and add in a plant fertilizer application to meet your Lyme needs. One of the things that can be really helpful about this is that goCrop prints a report that, based on your plant applications, will total up how much urea you plan on applying or how much lime you plan on applying, so that you know how much you might want to order or how much it might cost to meet those goals given those nutrient applications. So we're here. We've kind of gone over the pieces here. And so now I want to touch on a few more things before we wrap up. And I know we're way over, but we'll have this all in one Zoom or video for you to look at later. So I didn't finish any of my other nutrient balancing. If something's not filled in completely, your Vermont P index will not calculate, but you can click here to see why. And it's because we didn't fill in a bunch of our soil information that the P index needs in order to calculate the value and its interpretation. So it's really nice that goCrop just doesn't tell you that there is a problem. It tells you where that problem is. So you can go back and enter that data so it can do what it needs to do to meet the plan requirements. We can go to our last step once we're done with all the nutrient balancing, and basically it says, hey, you're done. You've done it. But almost, because there are some reports, and we do need to check if those reports are still in line with the 590 standard. And this is a great time where we can see if data was entered correctly, or if there are a few things that just aren't quite lining up. So using what's next, we can go to see our plan report, or we can go back to our dashboard to click to see our report. So we'll click this. And that brings us here to the report tabs. And just to back up a minute, you can always get to your report tabs from your dashboard or from your annual planning page. You got your dashboard and your report. So we'll click report. This is right back to where we just were. And the first screen you see is a bunch of individual farm reports. You got your plan narrative, manure sources, manure drawdown, all the stuff all the way down. And we have your individual field plan reports with what we just planned to apply, and then a field record log, right? So the individual plan reports, we have one complete because we did the nutrient balance and some other incomplete information. And then we also have the field record log. It says it's all complete, but remember, goCrop checks to see if things are complete, not if they're accurate. But there aren't any records, right? It's 2026. We haven't entered anything. But we also, in our individual reports, there are these labels, if it's Vermont NMP or if it's optional. Some farms may or may not require these to meet their reporting standards, and some things are just added as well for other reasons. And then if the report is complete or not. Right now, goCrop doesn't know, but we know that the farm narrative is complete. So we can click, we can generate each one of these reports individually, which is great. And it will show us there. We can download it. We can open it up as a PDF. And directly from here, there's another button where we can download, but we can also print it. To get back to that report screen, we're going to click report. And then I know that we didn't fill out all the information for all of our fields. So our P index report is incomplete. But what's nice is that when we click on an individual report, it will tell us where what's missing and where to find it so that we can have a complete report. But it does print out or it does generate a report with the information we do have. And again, you can download it, open it as a PDF, or download it or print it on these icons here. And go back to report. So the other handy thing here is that if we click the generate button, goCrop will create a combined report of all your individual farm reports and individual field reports that will meet the 590 standards. It doesn't generate the record log with that. So when you click generate, again, we'll do all the individual Vermont NMP reports, not the optional reports, and the individual field reports. And so we'll click generate for that. And goCrop's like, wait a minute, you've got a bunch of incomplete information. Are you sure? The try again button is not going to work in this case because it's incomplete, but we're going to say, you know what? I know I don't have it all, but I still want to see what I've got, and we'll generate again. There are two different scrolls here, one for your browser over here, this big one, and then one to actually scroll through all of your reports in your combined report. One thing that is really helpful here that you don't see until you get to the report is your manure drawdown. So after you complete all your nutrient balancing, it's really important to go back to your manure drawdown and make sure that you are applying the amount of manure you need to meet requirements. So this manure drawdown report is really helpful for that. There are some other ways to review and look at reports to make sure things are entered correctly. But again, work with your technical assistance provider or reach out to someone in extension if you want help with that. I'm going to go back to reports. And I think, and then if you want to also, there's this customize button, and that can be helpful if you're like, well, I only want 5 of the individual reports and I want them all generated together. I don't want to generate them individually. You can go to the customize button, uncheck everything that's checked, and then just click the ones you want, whatever that might be. It automatically checks individual field reports, so also uncheck the ones you don't want there. You can check all and uncheck all of them by using the little button in the upper left corner. Check all, uncheck again, and then check the ones you do want. And then you can generate a custom report. Again, we're missing a bunch of information, but we'll generate anyway. And then I have the reports, only the reports that I want because I want to generate custom. Okay, a couple of hanger-on things yet. And I'm going to go back to the dashboard for this because one thing I forgot to mention in nutrient balancing is that this is in progress. You know, we might be finished with it, but remember in all the other places where we're entering information, it had a complete or incomplete or blank setting. For nutrient balancing and nutrient balancing over only, I think it's, you know, not started, in progress. And then we have this done balancing button. So if you've balanced the field and you're like, I'm done, I feel really good about this, I don't need to see it again, you can click done balancing, and then it'll change the status, or you can click done balancing ? And it'll change the status to done balancing. This can be really, really, really helpful if you've got 30 fields and you're doing a couple at a time to help remember where you left off, what you finished, and where you want to start. It can also be really helpful if you have a handful of fields and you're like, yep, I treat these the same all the time. And then you've got a handful of fields that you're not sure where you want to put your nutrients to best maximize the return. You can leave those fields in this ? as a reminder to come back to think about those and reallocate nutrients if need be. And that's really, really important, or can be really helpful, especially when you're looking at your manure drawdown and you're like, oh, I need to add more to certain fields if I can, or I need to back off other fields if I need to, depending on the manure drawdown report. And using this done balancing can be a nice quick way to make notes or to leave notes for yourself for later, what you might want to come back to and change. So we'll connect on records for a moment because this can also be really helpful. And I think we'll have another tutorial that goes on this a little bit more. But when you go to records, typically what it'll show is your last 2 years of records, and that includes things like analyses and manure tests and soil tests. So even if you haven't put any application records, you might have a lot of records when you first come here because of all the other information you've entered. But chances are, if you're in records, what you want to do is to add a manure application or a fertilizer application. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So we're in records. I clicked add a new record in the upper right corner. It brought me to this form, and then I choose manure application. From this, I choose a location, the record date, and then continue to fill in the information with information you've already provided. So your manure source, if you want to record as a rate, total, or loads, depending on what you choose here will change what you see below. So I choose a rate, pretty straightforward, how many gallons per acre I applied. If I choose a total, again, pretty straightforward, total I've applied to the entire field, right? So, my rate might be 6,000 gallons per acre, but my total might be 60,000 if I applied, 6,000 to a 10-acre field. Or I might do it in loads. And this is when that spreader really is helpful, where you choose your spreader that's liquid, and you go into how many loads you applied to that field. And that is where knowing, having it calibrated equipment is important too. And then you choose your incorporation method, similar to what you saw in the plan. And then the soil moisture as well. One other piece with this is that sometimes folks go into planning and they enter their records and then they say, I've already entered my record. Well, it's great that your plan reflects what you've already done, potentially, if we're working that way. But ideally, we're meeting now and you're creating a plan, and then later you're entering your record. And I think part of what I'm trying to say here is that in some ways it seems like you're entering information twice, right? You're in planning and you're saying, I'm planning on applying whatever in spring to whatever field. And then you're also coming back to your records and saying, yeah, I did that thing, and I did that thing on this specific date. So just be clear with yourself when you're going into goCrop that when you're planning, it's what you're planning on doing, and you know that you're in the planning section because it's a date range. But when you're in records, it's what you've actually done. You've gone in the field, it's been applied, and that's going to have a real singular one-day date. So just to kind of reiterate that that's what that is. And then I want to go over how to add a fertilizer application. So again, I went to that new record. I chose fertilizer application. I choose my location, choose my record date. You choose your fertilizer applied, your type. And this is just a standard drop-down menu. It's nothing that you've entered. Just choose the fertilizer you applied. Then you're recorded as rate, total, loads, just like it is from NOR application. And then time to incorporation, and then your soil moisture. The other record that can be really important to create as well is the weather record. This is required for when you're applying fertilizer or nutrients. And again, if you're, I think it's a small, for some farm types, it's every day. And for some farm types, it's the day before application, the day of application, and the day after application. If you don't know which weather records you need to take and how often, please reach out to your technical assistance provider. goCrop is here to take your weather records and store them for you, but you do not need to store your weather records in goCrop. If you have another system that works for you, that's great, that's fine. And to some degree, that's also true with fertilizer records. You don't need to store those in goCrop if they're synthetic. If you're using organic nitrogen-containing amendments or manure, goCrop does need those records because it has that mineralizing nitrogen that needs to be tracked from year to year to account for in your nutrient balance. But this is what the weather record looks like. And I think for records, the other thing that we can look at, right, when we go back to records is just the filtering options can be really helpful because this is a lot going on, and maybe I only want to see my fertilizer applications and my manure applications. So now I'm not seeing my soil tests and fertilizer analyses. And that can be helpful because we also have similar functionality that we did in our steps that can be really helpful. So for example, if I've got my manure application and I'm applying at 6,000 gallons on all my corn fields at a particular time, I can say, okay, I'm going to duplicate this. And I'm duplicating that manure application that was on my first field. And now it's going to bring up that duplication, and I can modify it to go onto one of my other fields that's using the same date, all the same other information. Maybe I'm going to change this to rate because that's actually what needs to happen. But there is a time-saving device here where you can duplicate records, and you can also edit multiple records just like we could in some of the steps in goCrop. So there are some shortcuts, and I think there's a manual coming out that will also describe these to you, but these can be huge time-saving devices if you're using them well. It can also be a huge time sink if you're duplicating the wrong thing 10 times. So on that note, if you are, do have a record that you want to delete. You saw here that I could check this and I can delete it here. I think it's worthwhile mentioning that we entered soil test in your plan, and that soil test is a record. And when you're in the plan, you don't have the opportunity to delete the record, but when you are in the records tab, you can delete the soil test record. So just, if you're like, this is an extra soil test, I don't need it, something weird happened, you can delete it. You can't delete it from planning, but you can delete it by records by either checking it, choosing delete, or by opening it up, editing the record, and choosing the little trash delete button. Okay, one more thing before we sign off. Sorry, this is really long, but the one tab we haven't gone over yet is farm assets. And by and large, I want you to ignore farm assets. But there's one really neat thing in here that I think is worth bringing up. But before we get into that, just a quick layout. Farm assets are your fields, manure sources, fertilizers, and spreaders. I'm going to use the filter function because I only want to look at fields right now. And to do that really quick, I'm just going to delete all of these. Not delete, remove. I'm not deleting anything. I'm just removing from visibility what's in my list. Now I have only my fields. I click my field, and now my list of fields is shown on the left, right? It's telling me I'm only showing fields. I have all my other assets there, but I'm only looking at my fields. It'll show me the details, my plan for my 2026 year. I could change that if I had multiple years, and then my records. I can add records from here. I'm going to say this again, I'm repeating this. Don't add records from here, just add it from the records tab, save yourself a click. But in farm assets, in the records section, I can see my records as a list, and I can see my records as a balance. So this is really helpful with when you're entering your records throughout the year. And for whatever reason, if you haven't been able to follow your plan, you can come to your farm assets, choose your field, go to the records tab, and see what your nutrient balance is according to the records that you've entered. So this can be helpful if you're in spring and you're like, I had planned on applying 8,000 gallons of manure. I only applied 6,000 gallons of manure. How much more urea can I apply to make up for that nitrogen I didn't apply within my plan? Okay. So again, records, it'll first show up as a list. But if we go to this little balance icon, we can see our nutrient balance from applied records. All right, so we went really long. We did a lot. We covered a lot of material, and I know I didn't cover everything as detailed as it could have in some sections, and maybe a little bit too much in others. I think I will just keep recording, Susan, for just a minute, because I want to just re-share this screen with my, nope. Sorry, I just got the button that says will not share my screen. Because I want to re-share my contact information just in case that is helpful. But I think we can stop recording. Sorry if I missed any questions.